Okay, you can go ahead and start, Mary Claire.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Mary Claire Speckner with the Bartholomew County Public Library, and I want to welcome you to tonight's event, Unexpected, Unforgettable, Is It for Black Citizens? This program is a result of the library wanting to have a program on Black history in the county. I reached out to Paulette Roberts a few months ago, and she grabbed onto the idea. She got Brenda Pitts, and they organized tonight's panel. And I want to thank both of them and all of our panel members tonight. And I want to give a special thanks to Stephanie Merrifield from our Digital Underground, who is kind of the power behind the throne and powering all this tonight. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion tonight. And over to Paulette.
I would like to welcome all the panelists first and the community members out there who are watching our program this evening, titled Columbus, Unexpected, Unforgettable, Is It for Black Citizens? Our objectives this evening will be to understand how our history has affected all of us today and everyone in the future. We also want to understand the current situation in Bartholomew County. We should be able to identify some key opportunities for improvement and an actual plan for change. We're going to have with us today a panel of 8 people. Hattie, who is going to be discussing equal rights legislation. Kimberly Easton will deal with education. Tom Harmon will deal with the economy and business. Olisa, who is our past chairperson of the NAACP, will be dealing with community issues. Ric King will deal with policing. Roxanne Stallworth will deal with social services. Jerone Wood will be dealing with some issues that relate to the Black male and his work on the city council. Dr. Rachel Woods will be talking to us about healthcare. When we talk about the historical overview, I would like for Stephanie to put some slides up at this time. We're going to start with the historical overview. The fight for freedom is generational. And our second slide, freedom and justice for all. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is a portion of the Declaration of Independence from July the 4th, 1776. And we certainly do want freedom and justice for all. Next. When we talk about the history of Columbus, we need to begin in the early 1800s. We have records that show that there was at least one person named Nancy, who was a pauper in the 1800s, around 1821 maybe, who needed to be taken care of. So she is listed on record as being one of the first African Americans in Columbus, Indiana. Blacks and whites have worked together throughout the settlement of America. We have fought the environment. We have fought racism to establish life for our families, and we want protection just like anyone else. There were many different Black settlements in Columbus, Indiana, for example, over on First Street, which was called Little Africa. And then we had a Black settlement in the Clifty area, but there are many others also, but those were the 2 most prominent Black settlements in early Black history in Columbus, Indiana. There were many incidents that happened in the 1850s that made Blacks move from one county to the next or to move north. And that was because of the fugitive law that came to in being, which made conditions not so good in the Columbus area. We also have Jim Crow laws that followed slavery, and it left the community still segregated and abused. Blacks only had access to menial jobs or they farmed. Most Blacks were either butlers or domestics in various white homes in the area. Next slide, please. The population of Blacks in the local counties. We first want to look at Bartholomew County, and you'll see that in 1820, on record, it shows no Black persons. But then in 1830, you will see 6, 1840, 34, 1850, 82, 1866, and 1870, 42. But if you look at Jackson, Jennings, and Jefferson, people would go back and forth between these counties, and you'll see that there are larger numbers in the other counties than is shown in Bartholomew County. But a lot of those people worked in Bartholomew County. But when things started to get messy, they would move back to Jackson or move back to Jennings or Jefferson. Next slide, please. In 1880 and through 1860, we find that segregation still continued. We still had separate neighborhoods. We had at that time only one Black church, which was Second Baptist Church. And we find that in 1920s, there were 2 ladies who were African American who belonged to Second Baptist Church, and they were the first women to register to vote. On the second point, Blacks moved out of the area for better opportunities as the economy moved from farm to factories. J. Irvin Miller established Cummins, Inc., and Blacks were hired predominantly on the factory floor. But as time went on, as we all know, there were many Blacks who came into the area from different states who were in other positions also. Blacks established their own businesses. For example, we had Mr. Booker, who had the sawmill. We had Mr. Goins, who had a hotel. We had Mr. Hanley, who had barbershops on Washington Street, and many, many others that had different businesses. Blacks helped each other, and churches played a major role during this time. We were more cohesive at that time because we needed each other more. And Black women played a pivotal role in helping others and educating whites about what Blacks experienced and what it was like. Next. From 1960 to 2020, Cummins began hiring Blacks in professional ranks. Many left Columbus again because of segregation or discrimination. Black citizens became dissatisfied. Protests began in Columbus and outside the area. Black and white citizens worked together to end segregation. And we want that to continue to happen because it takes all people for things to improve, things to change for the better. We had various organizations that were established during that time. We have the Human Rights Commission, the NAACP, the Laws Foundations, and later on we have the Pastor Alliance, and the BCSC diversity position was established. During the 21st century, as the community population continued to be diverse, the inclusion community effort was launched. While improvements have been made, prejudice and racism still exist in our community. They affect our freedom, they affect justice, and they affect the opportunities that we would like to have. Next. Brenda?
So now we're going to discuss with our panel where we are today. And thank you, Paulette, for that summary of our history, because as we talk about where we are today, a lot of the problems that we experience are a function of where we've been. And this area does have a very racist past, but we also need to be proud of all of the people who stood up to fight against that racism. So why don't we show the panel? If Stephanie, yes, thank you. And I would like to begin, and I want to thank each of you for agreeing to do this. I want to begin by saying two things to not only the panelists, but to those of you who are listening. This group, as are all African Americans, are a very diverse group. We think differently, we have different backgrounds, that type of thing. So as you listen to that, remember that because we see things differently may be a function of where we've come. So I ask that you listen for understanding, not for judgment. The next thing we'd like to do is to begin to get to learn and know more about our panelists. And as we've tried to put this together, we wanted a diverse mix of people. So we wanted some old people like me and some younger people like Jerone and Olisa. And then I'm gonna save the rest of you from any age reference. But some of you went to school with me, so I won't name names. But anyway, we put it together trying to get a sense of the broadest view. So as we go through this discussion, we'll try to cover as much territory as possible, but it doesn't mean that we will cover every little detail in each given area. And we've divided people by sectors. So let's go and meet our panelists. And panelists, if you will give us your name, talk a little bit about how long you've been in Columbus and what you've done since you've been here, and any other things that you think are pertinent. So I will begin with, let's begin with Hattie.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Hattie Cable. I think I'm the only white person on this panel, but I was honored to be asked to be a part of it. I am originally from Appleton, Wisconsin, which is a city in central Wisconsin near Green Bay. Appleton was actually a sundown town, which meant that Black people were not allowed to stay overnight in my hometown from the years 1930 to 1970. And this is something that I never learned in school and didn't learn until I had moved out when I was an adult. So I found that interesting when I was refreshing on Columbus's history as well, about some of these unknown histories of racism in the places that we've spent large portions of our life. So I've lived in Columbus for 3 years now. I moved here for my husband's job. He's a minister at the Unitarian Church. And I am an attorney. I work in child welfare in Jennings County. So I live in Columbus downtown, but I work over in Jennings County. And my husband and I try to be advocates for social justice and racial justice whenever we can. We're also raising a child who's 1.5 years in this community of Columbus. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the legal histories in Columbus and in our larger country about racial dynamics, as well as anything else that comes up in the conversation. And so I'm honored to be here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly?
Well, thank you. I feel so honored to be a part of this conversation. I grew up here in Columbus, Indiana, so I'm from Columbus, Indiana. And I left here in 2018 and lived all over the country, working as a television news anchor reporter. And I think it was I returned in 2014. And I think it was Mrs. Roberts who said, Kimberly, I think you were the first African-American from Columbus, Indiana to get an anchor job. And I was like, is that telling me I'm old or I'm a trailblazer, or is that a compliment? But you might, I just thought that was an interesting little fact that she had emailed me on. And so I've had a very interesting, very diverse cultural experience as a television news anchor reporter, as you can imagine, working from California to Pittsburgh to Kentucky to Chicago. So I returned in 2014 when my mother unfortunately was passing of cancer. She passed in 2017. And I was doing a lot of traveling and I was having a hard time connecting to the community. And so I had a pastor here locally. Says he kept telling me, Kimberly, you need to teach, you need to get synced into the community here. And finally, he called me one day and said, hey, I've got the perfect position for you, multicultural diversity leader with the district. And I think it would be a good fit with your array of experiences. So it has been a treat and a joy. I've been back 6 years. I've been with the district now for a year, and we're working on several different initiatives. And we'll get into that at some point. And you can also see it on our BCSC web page. We are one of the resource pages there. But yes, it's been exciting to just reconnect to the community, and I can live anywhere and I choose to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would mention that Kimberly's family has roots back to 1820s in Indiana. So between Jennings County and Bartholomew County. So there's a lot of history there. And her family has also been involved in the protests that we had during the early 70s that desegregated Columbus, Indiana. So now let's go to Tom.
Tom needs to unmute.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for allowing me to participate in this. It's been an honor. I agree. I grew up in North Vernon, Indiana, which is about 30 miles south of Columbus, and graduated there in 1970 and went to school at IU and then later on U of L. And upon graduating, I came back to work at Cummins in 1978. I worked there for approximately 8 years and then left Cummins to join my father's business back in North Vernon. So I've had the experience of growing up in Southern Indiana and in both Jennings County and then living my adult life here in Bartholomew County. I have raised my wife, Mary, and I have raised our daughters here, and they've graduated and have moved on, but we are still here. And, we are both very involved in the community in a lot of ways. And it's a place we enjoy living and being, and there's a lot of opportunities to be a lot of other places, but here I think there's things we can do here in Bartholomew County that we can reach the pedals on, and that's why I like being here, because this community is kind of a let's figure it out how to get it done kind of community. So thanks for allowing me to be on the panel.
Thank you for participating. Olisa?
Hi, my name is Olisa Humes. I'm a longtime resident of Columbus. I grew up here since I was 3. And then I moved away a couple of times, but I've always come back to Columbus. So I work in Columbus. I do some, I'm a family advocate. I'm a case manager. So I do a couple of different things. And I was the president of the NAACP. I stepped aside so I could run for a county council position because I feel like if we need to lead by example, and I kept asking people to be a part of that. And I felt the best way to show people how to do it was to do it. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And I would mention that you have long family roots in Indiana too, in Jefferson County, Indiana. Ric King.
Hello, my name is Ric King. I'm a lifelong resident of Bartholomew County, Columbus, Indiana. Graduated from high school in '69, and it's just a pleasure to be here and appreciate being asked to be part of it. I mean, and I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to sit down and watch us. Like I say, I'm born and raised here, and currently, I got out of school, started working at Cummins Engine Company in 1969. I've been here ever since. Currently, I serve as a chairperson of the Citizens Review Board, which is like we listen to and process complaints filed against the police. I'm also a member of the Bartholomew County Sheriff's Merit Board. We oversee the hiring process and termination process, and rules, regulations we write and enforce, and so on. Again, thank you for watching, and thank you for letting me be part of this.
Thank you, Rick. And I would mention that Rick's family has long roots here as well. I would also mention that Rick's father was one of the first African-American law enforcement people in Bartholomew County. And he acquired that position. He was very proactive because he looked at how African-Americans were being mistreated in this community. So there was an incident where someone was beaten, a young Black man was beaten. And Mr. King took it up on himself to go into the sheriff's office and say, your officer did this. And the sheriff said, prove it. So he looked all through the courthouse yard, found the guy's tooth that had been knocked out, and then said, you need to hire me to fix these things. So that's being very proactive. He was also one of the key members who worked with Mr. Miller during the 1970s for the protest movement. So a lot of rich background here. And speaking of rich background, we'll move to Roxanne Stallworth, who is also a long-term member of the Columbus community and of Indiana.
Good evening. First of all, I too thank you for this opportunity. It's always good to be able to look at something and try and have an active, positive impact with that. But my name is Roxanne Stallworth, and I am actually fourth generation born and raised here in Columbus, Indiana. My sister and I were raised during the 50s by our dad, and both of us have stayed in the community. I have been on, I work at Columbus Township Trustee's office. I've been there 33 years. That doesn't make me old. And prior to that, I worked 12 years as Director of Residential Services at Developmental Services. So I feel that I have been invested in the community, not just because of the length of time that I've lived here, but also trying to be active and sit on various boards within the community.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Jerone.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. My name is Jerone Wood. I got to Columbus in 1995 with my family, moved here, went to Richards, went to Central, went to Columbus East where I graduated. After that, I went to Indiana State University. My plan was to never come back to Columbus. But like many of my friends, somehow we got trapped back, and I've been here ever since. Upon returning to Columbus, kind of went from job to job. I'm now a leasing agent here in an apartment complex here in Columbus. I also serve as a track coach at Columbus East High School, but I always knew there was a bigger purpose. I knew I wanted to help more people. I just didn't know how to accomplish that. So a young lady for the Democratic Party actually reached out to me about last year about an opportunity. At first I told her no, but I did my research. I did my due diligence, and I looked further into it, and I found out that city council was an opportunity for me to help people on a larger scale. It was also a cool opportunity because there had never been an African-American that had been elected to a city elected official. So I knew it was a great opportunity for me. So long story short, I won by 1 vote. And I am excited about the opportunity that I have in front of me, and we're excited to see what we can do for Columbus. And I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel, being that I am slightly the youngest person on here, only by a few years. But I definitely appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. The importance of voting. I hope you caught that he won by 1 vote. The other thing is that people like Jerome and Olisa make me feel comfortable that we're leaving these things, this welfare of Columbus, in good hands as these younger people step up and take over. Dr. Woods?
Hi, I'm Rachel Woods. I'm a pediatrician at Columbus Pediatrics. I moved here 4.5 years ago. I completed my training at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, and I went to med school at Ohio University. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you all for inviting me.
Well, thank you. We're delighted to have you as well. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to handle the first question, and I'll go person by person. And my question to each of you will be, how do you grade the racial situation in Columbus, Indiana on a scale of A to F, and give a reason why? So let's start with Hattie.
Okay, well, I feel like I'm the most short-term resident of Columbus. It's been 3 years, although my parents did live here in the late 80s for a few years. So it's kind of full circle for me to be back here. My mom was an assistant minister at North Christian Church, and my dad was the first minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation. So they're very surprised that we ended up here. But I would say, based on my extremely limited knowledge of Columbus, living here only 3 years, I would give the current racial situation in Columbus, or in Bartholomew County, a C. And I would say that I think we look great on the surface, especially when we compare ourselves to other similar sized towns in our region and in similar regions. But I think we all know that there's a lot of hate that simmers just below the surface. And it seems like every month or two, something bubbles up and we see something so ugly in our community. And people who know all the good things that happen in our community are always surprised, even though it continues to happen. So I think, like I said, comparatively, I think we're doing great, but I think there's always more room for improvement for us to become more welcoming and more anti-racist as a community.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly?
Wow. Well, I actually gave us a C minus, and that was being just for my, again, even though I grew up here, I've been gone for a while, and so and been in my being reacquainted with community, I was able to do some comparisons, and the biggest is we have a national issue. So, dealing with the racial climate across the country, we are feeling it as well. And I have to agree with Hattie, we have these bubbling up situations and boiling point situations. And a lot of us tried to not talk about it. And we're still in that kind of, which I was kind of surprised when I came back, this colorblind phase where we don't really want to talk about it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to embrace it. So after living in other different cities and states, it really kind of surprised me that Columbus isn't further along as far as embracing each other. It just seemed, and it appeared to me that we're still segregated in many ways, even though we're not segregated publicly. I noticed that the East Indians, they in the community, they stay together, and the Blacks are kind of staying together, but I don't see as much intermingling, even though we do have some interracial marriages. So it's a little perplexing for me. However, I have to rate it as C minus, and I was very close to giving it a D, I'll be honest. But there are a lot of people who are well-meaning here and are working so hard to make inclusion happen. Until that happens, I really can't give Columbus a better grade.
Okay. Tom?
Well, I would give it a C plus. And the reason I give it the plus side is because of things like tonight. It's given us a platform to have a dialogue and to talk about things. And I think Columbus is a city that you can explore into this space and have some dialogue. And I think as a community, I hope we'll move forward and continue to have dialogue about equity and systemic racism, so that we can move this community forward. There are a lot of different efforts in the community and a lot of activity around this area right now. And I hope as a community, we can kind of take advantage of that energy and latch on to that and begin to have conversations and efforts in the right direction, and can move us into the B category and hopefully into the A category, where we're really doing some things to move the needle. So I do think there's a lot of potential in this community, and it's small enough that you can reach the pedals on it. So I'm giving it a C+.
Okay. Olisa?
I don't, I was perplexed because I really wanted to give it a high grade, because I think that I feel like we are not that far along than where we were when I was in high school. I think though, we have potential. That's the part that I always see potential in people, and that may be a fault of mine, like, because you always want to side on the air of potential. But I think that I would say probably it's in between a C+ and a C-. I think that we have the potential to be the beacon on the hill for the rest of the country, to show them how to work the pandemic, whether it be the COVID-19 or the racial pandemic that we're experiencing right now. And that's my conundrum. I want to say C+, I want to say A+, but unfortunately I can't, because like I said before, I think that we are still in the same place that we were, and I graduated high school in 1990. So we're still in that same place where we're still fighting and talking about the same stuff. So, but even though we're still talking about the same things, I think that what the rally showed me was that people outside of the African American community are want to change. They want to do something different. So that's why I think I'll go with the C+. I'll go, and it's just so hard for me, because I mean, I see the potential. I see the potential that Columbus has, and it's going to take a lot of work. Like this potential, like, you know, when I was in school younger, people used to tell me, you're not working up to your potential. And I feel like that's where Columbus is. We have not worked up to our potential, but I'm hopeful that we will. So I'll say C+, C- in there.
Okay.
We have potential.
All right. Thank you. Rick?
Okay, for me, I mean, that's a tough question. And, you know, coming up with an answer that somebody hadn't already given you was even tougher. But, you know, Columbus has come a long way, but yet we still have a long way to go. I mean, and I'm going to give Columbus a strong C+ or a weak B-. And the reason I'm saying that is because, you know, I knew what it was like back in the 50s and 60s. You know, even in the 50s, I was only 9, 10, but I remember things. I remember the 60s very well. And here we are in 2020. So like we've come a very long way, but we still got a long way to go. I mean, we still got pockets of racism, but, you know, I can't say the whole town is that way. I mean, I don't see a lot of it, but there's always going to be that occasion, you know, where it's, you know, it pops up, it rears its ugly head and it just pops up. I mean, like I've experienced it here, you know, within the last few years, but, you know, like it's just, I mean, it's, you know, just like, wow. And it's going to be a lot of places because it's all across the nation now. But like every now and then you just hear somebody say something that, I mean, and I just have to stop them and I say, hey, let's talk about this. I heard what you said and let's talk about it. But yeah, I mean, I would give Columbus a very strong C+ and a weak B-. Like I say, we've come up based on just where we were and where we are, and like where we have the potential to go. There's always potential for growth. So that's not why I'm giving it a B+ or a B, you know, because you got to have room for improvement.
Okay, good. Roxanne?
I have to agree with Rick and pretty much everything that everyone has said, but I do look at it from one standpoint. First of all, I'm going to give it I'm going to give it a C+, I think. No, I'm going to give it a C plus. But here's what when I started thinking about that question, you always hear that Columbus is different by design. And when I hear different by design, that does take me to a very positive place, because just like Rick stated, he and I are the same age. I graduated in '69. He and I graduated together. So there were certain things that I know that we have come a long way in. For right now, we eat where we want to eat. We live where we want to live. We shop where we want to shop. We go to school where we want to go to school. And we get in our cars and we go to good jobs. So because of that, yes, we have come a long way. But I think that the racism that we now face is far more covert. I think that as I have gotten older, when I was in high school, I handled it a different way. Never shied away from it. But as an adult, now when I see it, I know what I'm seeing. But it does, it is far more covert now than what it was before. I think that Columbus has a lot of very good things to offer a community, to offer people, whether it's families or single. But I think when you just scratch the surface, all that the different pockets of racism easily appear.
Okay. These are all great comments. I can tell each of you really thought about this deeply. What about you, Jerone?
So I'm not sure if it's just because I'm the younger of the other panelists, but I was leaning toward like a B minus. And the reason behind that is being that I am younger, a lot of the racial incidents, a lot of the I was just thinking racial incidents I didn't see growing up. I didn't have too many instances where I felt like racism was going on. And that's from being here from second grade up until I was a senior in high school. Now, were there incidents that took place? Absolutely. Two that I know for a fact that'll always stick in my mind. But as far as it being a constant thing, it was never constant. Being that I'm now on city council, I'm in a lot of meetings and I meet a lot of people. And you can, even with the rally, like Olisa touched on, you can see that there are a lot of people that don't look like me, that care, that want to get involved. I hear this all the time. A lot of people will tell me, like, Jerome, how do I get involved? I know I'm not, African American, but I want to get involved. Tell me how I can help. So then the willingness to help, I feel like it is awesome. Columbus is very diverse. I think one of the panelists touched on earlier, even though we're diverse, we tend to stick in our bubble. I feel like at some point that'll break. I feel like at some point we have to start integrating. I think how we get there is by getting involved. That's why I was so happy about as far as running for city council and winning, because it's getting people that look like us in positions that we're not normally in. I feel like we have to break those barriers down. I feel like Columbus is moving in the right direction, which is why I'm leaning toward the B minus. And that's based off of just my perception, what I've dealt with since I've been in Columbus, my 20 years, 25 years. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm leaning toward the B minus. I can see why everybody else did the C, C plus, C minus, because all of those are valid points. I just feel like we're moving in a certain direction as long as we continue to kind of move with this wave. Because right now, I've never seen America, let alone just Columbus, but America kind of shifting and allowing the Black voice to finally be heard. Not saying that we matter more than anybody else. I know those arguments, but to hear our voice, I feel like that's huge. And I feel like Columbus is open to that. We just have to seize the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And do you mind if I call you Rachel?
Excellent. So I've only been here for 4 years, so I've been here a short time as well. So my grade is based on my short time here, my experience. I think I would give Columbus at this time, I would give them a B. And the reason I would do that, so I'll tell you a story. What I didn't know when I moved here and signed up for the job was that I was the first African-American pediatrician that worked at that office in its 30 plus years of existence. So when I signed the contract, I did not know that. All I knew was I had a friend who worked here, sounded nice. I will say when I arrived, my colleagues and coworkers, the senior doctors, I felt like they poured into me the best of their experience. And they didn't let my color deter them from pouring in the best that they had to give, you know? So that was my experience here. I will also say that something must be said, and I think a lot of the panelists may agree, for bringing a spirit of excellence forth in the community when you become involved, because excellence draws people of all colors, thoughts, backgrounds to your cause to make things better. So I try to work as excellently as I can to draw that forth out of people to where they want to support, where they want to be active, where they want to help, because they can't help but be involved to kind of get that out of them. I will say the benefit of living or thinking that way is that 2 years ago, we hired another Black pediatrician from Canada, and that's Dr. Mensah. So within the span of 2 years, where there were no Black pediatricians before, even in all of Columbus, right? There's other pediatric offices, they don't have Black doctors either. So within a span of 2 years, there are now 2 of us trying to bring forth the talent that we have to kind of benefit the community. So that's why I rated Columbus a B.
Okay, thank you. So basically, if I step back and summarize, it's a solid C. Having grown up here, I would say that at one point in time in the early 70s, Columbus was way ahead of its time. And if you go and look at the video that was produced by the Human Rights Commission that looked at what's happened, we were probably way ahead of the game in terms of the active desegregation. A lot of it was due to the fact that we had a strong leader in town by the name of J. Irwin Miller. And he was very close to the African-American community and spent a lot of time setting the stage for everyone in town, including at Cummins. So the issue, I think, is that we became complacent after that. And things then just started, we didn't work as much for it. And so those of you who came after us that didn't have to grow up in segregation started to see something that was very different. And we thought we had arrived as a community, so not as much work. But the thing I love hearing from each of you is that you see potential for this community to be something better than what it is today. Before we move on to the other questions, we had a major fail in that, Paulette, you and I didn't introduce ourselves. So I'm going to ask you, Paulette, to just, I think a lot of people know you, but there's probably some new people that may not know you. So would you tell us a little bit about you? You need to unmute. Okay. You're still muted.
There you go.
Okay. My name is Paulette Roberts, and I arrived in Columbus in 1970 as a school teacher. I started my teaching career at Southside Junior High School and left there in 1978 when I had my son, and then I returned in 1979 to work at Central Middle School, and that's where I retired from. I was married to Dennis Roberts, who was a born and raised in Columbus, Indiana, and we had very different views of what Columbus was like. So he had to school me, and of course I had to school him. But it is a community where you grow into it, because things can be very subtle, and you have to learn to pick up on the issues that people are referring to. But that's me.
Okay, thanks. And I'm Brenda Hunter Pitts, and I grew up in this community. I was born in Madison, Indiana. My father's family came from Hanover. My mother's family came from an equally large community of Vernon, Indiana, which is even smaller than North Vernon. And looking at North Vernon, I spent a lot of time in North Vernon, so I know Tom a little bit through that experience because everyone knew everyone else. But having grown up here in segregation gives me a different view. And my family goes back in Indiana all the way to the 1830s. So I have 4 generations in Bartholomew County. We didn't necessarily stay. We were one of those families that moved back and forth between all of these booming metropolises. So, but I grew up here, went to school here, ended up going to IU, getting a degree in education, could not get hired within the Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation. So I ended up moving away for a few years and then came back during one of those recessions that was in the nation and started to work at Cummins. And during that time, I spent 30 years there. My experience was in human resources. And then I finished my career as heading up the foundation and the diversity effort. And I spent most of my life at Cummins working in the field of diversity or affirmative action or whatever you would want to call us. I've seen us move through the various segments. And I'm so delighted that we're now at this inclusive community effort, that we realize the importance of recognizing everyone. So I've stayed here for that entire period. I've had children that went through the school system. None of them has stayed, as many as have several of your children moved away. I hated growing up in Columbus and thought that I would move away forever, but here I am and have been for a while. So let's jump into then these different segments. And what we've done is to organize our panelists by sectors of the community. And I want to begin with looking at the legislative side, and that would be with you, Hattie, talking about what you've seen that has gone extremely well, what you see that needs to improve, and also what you would suggest as to your plan of how we should approach that. So, Hattie?
Okay. So I think a lot of us learned about a lot of civil rights legislation and landmark Supreme Court cases in school, which is a good thing. So I'm not going to go super deep in depth with those. Brown versus Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act of '64, Loving versus Virginia, cases like that. There is one that I wanted to touch on that I don't think is taught as much in school that is really important, and that's Batson versus Kentucky from 1986. And that's a Supreme Court case that says that prosecutors cannot use their peremptory strikes when they're doing jury selection based on the basis of race. So that if you have what's often the case as a Black defendant and the attorneys are trying to select their jury, they cannot strike Black members from the jury on the basis of race. And you can raise what's called a Batson challenge if you believe that's what's happening. And I think that that's a great tool to make sure that our criminal justice system is being administered equitably to people, although it is hard to prove that a prosecutor did that based on race. I wanted to focus more on the local legislative efforts, specifically the Human Rights Commission. I think when I first moved here, I thought that the Human Rights Commission was just a group working to make life better for everyone and a nonprofit. And I didn't realize that it's actually codified by law in our municipal code, and that it's actually something that has power to get justice and to make changes. So for people who don't know, this is an ordinance in the law for Columbus, stating that it is the public policy of Columbus that it must provide all citizens with equal opportunity, and that it's unlawful to discriminate on the basis of race as well as other categories.
Okay.
So this ordinance was given actual power to subpoena witnesses and records, to issue cease and desist letters, and to order payment of damages. And I think as far as what remains to be done in the legal sector, part of it is just increasing awareness for this avenue so that people know that if they are a victim of a hate crime, or if they are experiencing harassment or discrimination, that there is this legal mechanism that they can go to file a complaint and have it be investigated and hopefully get justice for whatever has happened to them. I think there could be a greater awareness in our community of this option, as well as being aware of the timelines, because you do have to file your complaint within 90 days of the discrimination, or 180 days if it is housing specific discrimination. So my ideas as a plan would be to increase awareness for this option. It would also be to increase free legal clinics for marginalized people who don't have the funds to hire an attorney of their own for whatever issues they're facing in life, whether that be civil rights issues or just personal issues that they need help with and need an attorney to help them. And I think the other thing that Dr. Wood spoke about as well is just making Columbus a more desirable place for everyone to live. And that includes lawyers and judges from a more diverse background. I think if we had more representation on our county bar of Black people and other races fighting in the courtrooms and making those decisions from the bench, that would be better for everyone. And it's up to us as white people and as all of us as Columbus residents to make this city better and make it a place where people can feel safe and feel valued and want to move and spend their life working for justice in the legal realm. So those are my basic ideas. And I would also just encourage people to use the Human Rights Commission, use the legal process, filing civil rights complaints with Department of Justice, rather than bringing in police unnecessarily. I think we know that sometimes when police get involved, especially with people of color, that can end badly. And
Right.
It's my opinion that whenever we can, we should try to do different avenues that avoid that involvement from law enforcement. So I will speak more about any of those issues later on, but that's where I'll leave it for now.
Okay, thank you. And that was one of the major things that was accomplished in this community, was the establishment of the Human Rights Commission, because that was a huge fight to make that happen. So we shouldn't take that lightly.
Absolutely.
A lot of people had a lot of blood, sweat, and tears invested in that.
Yeah.
So now I would like to move with you to Rachel to talk about the field of healthcare.
Mute.
You're muted.
Okay. Thank you for waiting. So as I said earlier, I've only been here for a few years. So in that perspective, I have a short, we'll say a short perspective on it. But I feel like in our office, we do have a pretty diverse patient population, although not many African Americans, but pretty diverse. We do try very hard to give them all equal, excellent care. So we do try our best to do that. And I think our office staff do work well doing that too. I think for us, one thing that we could do as an office that would benefit all patients, not just marginalized ones, but would especially help them, is the outreach that we do in the community. I feel like being able to see your doctor in the community is important, to know that they are advocating for you outside of the office. I think that that's especially important. So for myself, I'm challenging myself to be more active in the community and to show my face throughout and to give my opinion throughout, and just to be visible, so not just, go to work, go home, go to work, go home, but to do a little bit more, and that can be encouraging, not just to the kids, but to the families, and to show that it matters to me what their life's like is outside of the office, you know? So one thing I find is that when families come into the office, I'm usually seeing everyone on their best behavior and with their best foot forward. So the kids may be a little bit nicer. Everyone's nice when they come into the office, but the reality is when they return home, the home situation that they have may not have been shown to me while I was there. And some of these home situations are not great. I know that throughout Columbus Regional Health that we've been striving to make our primary care offices a medical home. And what that means is that we have fingers that reach out into the community so that when you are at home somewhere, we are there trying to make your life safer, better, trying to develop the potential that every kiddo has. Every kiddo has one. And most families, they are marginalized for different reasons, some due to race, some due to class actually, and some just to abject poverty. So there's more that we can do as a group to get our faces and our voice out there and to work throughout the community to show that as your doctor, I don't just care about your health in the office, but there is a whole spectrum to health, which includes your family life, the work life of your parents, the interactions between the kids and their parents. All of that matters, and being sure that you're going to have a healthy life and the best opportunity for every kid to live whatever their dream is. So it's pretty multifactorial.
Good. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to Tom to talk about the economy. And I would mention that Tom has been very active in the community, trying to increase the education and understanding of Black culture. So he's gets around, and particularly having his own business helps out. So Tom.
Well, talking about the economy right now is a tough challenge. We've gone from an economy that was very robust and strong and hitting on all cylinders and low unemployment rates to one that has been totally stifled by the COVID virus. And there are a lot of small businesses and a lot of companies that will struggle to survive this effort. So, but I do see things getting better. We got to get our handle on this virus, but I think people are still ready to the economy is still strong and people are ready to move forward. We just got to get a sense of comfort to do that. You know, when it comes to African American businesses in this community, there are several African American businesses in this community that range from barbershops to insurance companies, to our construction company, retail business, professional people that have grown in this community over the years. And as Paulette mentioned earlier, there were several Black businesses back in the day. And the thing that I think we have to keep in mind about Black businesses is they might be owned by Black people, but they need the business of everybody to survive.
Yeah,
That's right.
And you know, in a community of Columbus or Bartholomew County of 70,000 people, and African Americans make up a very small percentage of that. So a person isn't going to get rich if they get all the African American business. They're going to have to figure out how to do business with everybody, and everybody's going to have to make sure that they patronize them also. You know, which means you know, access to capital and banks who are willing to support and people who are willing to promote and be good customers to these businesses. So, and this is a community where I think that can happen. I use our circumstance as kind of an example. Joined my father's business in North Vernon, Indiana, and we were growing that business and decided that we needed to take on some increased capabilities. And we had the opportunity to get involved in the ownership of Taylor Brothers Construction, which is a company that has been in the community since 1933. A totally white company that's had involvement with Cummins Engine Company and many architectural buildings that make up the Columbus landscape. So, you know, my thought process or my concern was when we took over the company is can we maintain that type presence in the community and be accepted as the new owners of the company and continue that tradition of that company. And I feel like we've done a good job of doing that. And that's also because the community has done a good job of accepting that. And you know, I obviously stay involved in a lot of different boards, but our employees do a lot for the community, and having healthy businesses in your community to give back and to serve and to provide opportunities for other folks is important. So I do think, you know, the African-American business climate in Bartholomew County has been better in the past 20 years than it has been. And I hope it continues to grow. I can remember when we used to have to drive to Indianapolis to get a haircut with a black barber. And now we've got several options around the community that we can get that done. So we are making progress. That's kind of a key barometer, that and the women getting their hair done here in the community. So.
Okay, thank you. Roxanne, you want to talk about social services?
All right, social services. I think one of the things that I want to address first off is that it's probably a preconceived thought that the majority of people that come into I'm going to use our office, the Columbus Township Trustee's office, is African American. And in actuality, that is not true. We see a lot of different people, but I can truly say that the majority of people coming through our doors are not African American. Now, when people come through our door, you know, the main thing we always want to try and do is to make them as comfortable as possible, because we are seeing them at their lowest point. They're going to be evicted. They have been evicted. Their electricity is getting shut off. They have no food and they have no gas to get to work. So we see people at their absolute lowest point. So I think one of the things when I think about what has worked in social services over the years, I think available housing has worked, accessibility to some services, jobs within Bartholomew County, even in this COVID-19 time. The unemployment rate within Bartholomew County is still lower than the national average. So when I think about those sort of things in social services, I think that we have done a very good job to a certain point. But I also look at the fact that for people who are African American, addressing specifically African Americans at this point, I think that one of the things that I feel that there's a lack of is education to the system. Now, I know a lot of times when you think of people getting into the system, you think of people who are going to take advantage or going to stay in the system too long. The problem with that is that the system is set up for people to get into it, but not to get out of it. But in our office, we actually take a more holistic approach to a person's situation. So if a person has been late with their rent for 6 months and they come to the trustee's office and they're going to get $1,000 or think they're going to get $1,000, that's not going to take care of their problem. But we're going to address the problem in a more holistic way to see who we can partner with, that we can partner with Love Chapel, that we can partner with Brighter Days, that we can partner with United Way to be able to address an individual's needs. So black, white, blue, or purple, that's what has to be done at this point to get people in the system, to utilize it, to be able to get out of the system. And I think that part of that also what must happen is that we as individuals have to have a change in our mindset to understand that people who are in need are not always users. They are just having a hard time.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, Kimberly, you're up with education.
Well, I could just say so much has changed in education. I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, to come back and look what's going on with BCSC, I'm amazed at what this team of administrators have done over the years. And in large part, it could be because we had such an influx of the Latinx community here. And so we do have some teachers, we do have some underrepresented teachers in our system that we didn't. Now, when we talk specifically to Black Americans, not so much, okay? There's still a lot of work to be done. But when I say a lot has changed, we have the iGrad program and we have the English learning, language learning program as a complete department. And I think because we had this influx of the Latinx community, the district literally had to just turn and say, we've got to take care of this because many of the students didn't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so what happened was the 30% Latinx population in our student with our student body, 30%. And then we have 3% African American. And so I think student population. So I think when you have 3%, we kind of got lost in the shuffle somewhere. We got lost. And that's when I say not so much. We got to accomplish much more. But they've had a huge, huge task. But what I think is amazing is the fact that this team of administrators have said, we recognize this and we're going to do something about it. And this is no longer going to be the office, the Multicultural Diversity Office is no longer going to be an office that's going to be reactionary to the bubbling up of the ugly head, as somebody had said earlier in our discussion. When something bad goes wrong, we're just going to react. And that's why I was excited about this position, because there are 4 directives to kind of deal with some of the issues that we have going on in specific to the Black students that we have. Underrepresented teacher retention and recruitment. We have a guide team of 10 to 12 people working on strategies on how we can get more Black teachers in our system at BCSC. Our Family Academic Achievement Network, designed to specifically help our struggling Black boys in middle school. They're starting to have problems at 5th and 6th grade. We're losing our Black boys in 5th and 6th grade, and we can do much better. So we have a team working on strategies with that. Our diverse curriculum. I was surprised. We just, last year, we worked really hard with our librarians to find out how diverse our libraries are for our students. Very, extremely diverse. So now how do we start implementing this into our curriculum? So we have a team devoted to that. And then we have a restorative justice team that still deals with, how do we, when we do have issues or conflict with our students, how do we not only help the victim, but also help use this as a teaching lesson for the perpetrator? So we're doing a lot of work. We've got a lot of work to get done. And I really like that we're actually implementing a stakeholders process to come up together with some solutions as a community on how we can improve the quality of student life within BCSC. One of the first things I noticed is our teachers, our Black teachers are not in the system. Shirley Trapp was a PE teacher of mine, and I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a school district and never see somebody that looks like you in the classroom. And we're only seeing Blacks on the bus, or maybe driving the bus or in the cafeteria or cleaning. And just those images for our Black student can hurt their self-esteem. Now, growing up for me was different because I did have, I grew up on 9th Street, and I did have a very strong network of support. So I could do well in school because I had Second Baptist Church and opportunities to learn about my heritage at that time when I was growing up. But I couldn't imagine what life would be for our Black students and what it is now for our Black students who do not see somebody who looks like them in the classroom, in the position of authority. But when I get excited, when we talk about promise, I get excited because our administrators, they recognize this and they're working on it. And we have people in the community that have band together with us that are working on creative solutions to make some sustainable change within BCSC. I hope that helps everyone. We're doing a lot of work.
Why don't you tell us about the new program that's coming out at North this year?
Well, this year we have Mr. Huff that is teaching ethnic studies. And it is something that we had offered that before. And we were hoping to have it last year. And unfortunately, it just kind of didn't work. It didn't happen, but it is happening this year. And we have a lot of students participating in our ethnic studies program. And so I think they're going to be even more sustainable programs as our guide teams. All of our guide teams are, now they've been established. They're on the brink of coming up with those strategies that we can implement for long-term change. And so I do get excited about it because I've been involved in this work with members of the community who are passionate. And then we have an administrative team. They recognize that they want this sustainable change, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Okay, thanks. Rick, we're up to you to talk about policing.
Okay, policing, that's okay. I'm gonna start off with the city. I'm involved with the city and the county both, so I'm gonna start with the city. You know, going back to the 70s, you know, like there was a lot of like just racial profiling and so on going on. I mean, like I would get pulled over like on a weekly basis. I mean, you know, like, where you going? You know, like somebody fitting your description robbed somebody and installed their stereo. Here I am in the Corvette. I mean, you know, what can you do with a Corvette? You know, or in a glove box of one. You know, this went on, then like it evolved into the 90s. I jump up to 92. We still had some meetings going on, and Mayor Stewart got wind of it, and like he put together like had some meetings at the airport and so on. We come up with a solution to come together with the committee to put together a 10-point game plan to come up with the way to improve the relations between the city and the community. And part of that was like a citizens complaint process. Okay. And I've chaired that, you know, like since about 93, and every mayor has, you know, seen that they want to continue with it. And, you know, the current administration, Mayor Linnip, he wanted to take it a step further. And like one of his focal points was to make sure that we had a strong bond between the city, the citizens of the city, and the police itself. So like we hired someone to do a bench study of towns across the nation that pretty much are a mirror image of Columbus as far as size, population, and ethnic makeup. And we put together a program, and now, you know, like, and so like he just took it another step further. So now we have a complaint process in place where people can complain, and then like it will be heard by citizens of the community, which I think is a great thing, because we're one of the few towns in the Midwest that has this process that was not mandated by the government. I mean, a lot of them were like Department of Justice mandated, like Ferguson, Missouri, and so on. They got one, but it's mandated. But you know, our mayors, you know, have seen upon themselves to keep it. So like, and that's pretty much where we are with that. You know, like I get a lot of calls and complaints about people, and they say, well, you know, like the police are racist and so on. I said, well, there's a system in place. Use the system, and you know, like we get a name out there. Who is it? You know, we can track this person. We can like, I mean, how many times has, you know, he's done this to different people? What I'd like to see change, you know, I'd like to see more diversity in our police department. But the problem is, you know, like we're not getting applicants. And like this year, we had planned to go up to the Black Expo, to the Career Opportunity Day, and set up a booth and try and recruit. But, you know, like with the COVID-19, that was put on hold. So like, I would still like to see people apply. I mean, like we need more diversity within our department. And then going on to the sheriff's department, I mean, like, you know, like the previous administration, we had some, you know, had a couple of slip ups, some issues that, you know, like that were gone. You know, that, you know, we had the Owsley case, and we had another incident that was like from someone that was out of county, wasn't even part of this county, but nobody can control. And then like, but what we've done in the sheriff's department since then, there's been a death investigation team. When there is a death that is deemed somewhat suspicious, there's a team that is investigated, and this team is made up of the city, the county prosecutor, the state police, city police, the coroner, and the sheriff's department. So you don't have any one department looking at an investigation that relates to a suspicious death. Okay, like I say, I'm on the mayor board there, and like I'm the first person of color that has ever been appointed to the mayor board. And again, with the sheriff's department, I would like to see more diversity. But again, you know, people do not apply. I mean, years ago, like we had a booth, the city police had a booth, and we went up to the Black Expo, we set up, and I would tell people, I said, come to Columbus and, you know, let me show you around and so on. And we've had people come down, and I meet them out here west of town, right off the interstate, and I show them around. and they look around, and then the question will come up like, "You don't even have a barber shop." And I said, "Yeah, it's true."
Now we do.
Now we
Yeah.
do, you know.
Ew.
The wife would look at the husband, I'd show him around the schools and the parks and, apartment complexes and some of the neighborhoods. And then she looked at her husband and she said, "We're not moving to Mayberry." And, so, like to get minorities to come to town, I mean, we've had that struggle with both departments because the city, Columbus has not a whole lot to offer for a young person of color. I mean, there's no entertainment, unless you're married and got a family, there's not much to do as far as entertainment, like music and venues and restaurants and so on. And there's nothing anybody can do about that. I mean, as the town grows, I think these things are going to come, but for right now, people are just having, we're having a hard time recruiting minorities from other cities now. Maybe someone that's fed up with the big city maybe would like to come to Columbus, but to a smaller community where they could raise their child without the fear of the drugs. Well, not necessarily the drugs, but the violence and so on. Because we have a great school system, we have a great parks department. It's an excellent place to raise a family, but we're a young single person where we can't recruit. I mean, we're having difficulty in recruiting. And, that's the things I would like to see improved. It's just a way to attract and retain minorities. I mean, we had a few at the police department years back, and, the man that we had, his wife got homesick, so they went to Fort Wayne. Okay. So, that's pretty much it. I like to see things, I like to see some diversity. But like I say, people have to apply. I mean, we're looking, but people just aren't applying.
Yes, and I believe that there is a lot to be said about retention that comes along with recruitment.
Right.
Now, one of the things that Rick had mentioned to me was that there is in this review board that with the city of the people who make decisions about cases, 3 of the 5 decision makers are Black. Is that correct, Rick?
Yes, that's true. And then let me explain a little bit about the review board. Itself. It's made up of people of the city. We have the city attorney, we have a representative of the clergy, we have a representative of city council, we have a representative of the police department, and then we have the current president of the NAACP, and then others at large. And people that sit in and listen on complaints have no way or no ties or no paycheck or anything affiliated with the city. We are just citizens of the city, and we sit in and listen to complaints, and possibly, we don't listen to the complaint itself, but we listen to the appeals about the complaint. Then we make a decision from there and possibly pass it on to the Board of Works and Public Safety and the mayor. So it's all just total civilians that run this board or have a voting right in the board.
Okay. Anything else?
That's pretty much it. I probably skipped something, but I just want to take my hat off to the mayor for keeping it up, and every mayor before him for keeping it going, and to Mayor Stewart for having the foresight and the vision to put this in place when he saw that there was an issue. He pretty much nipped it in the bud. Day one. Because a buddy of mine who's no longer with us, Paul Jones, we went down and talked to the mayor about some issues that were going on here. And Mayor Stewart, he said, "I don't like that." And he's the one that got the ball rolling. And, I just, he's not with us anymore, but I had to take my hat off to him and every mayor since.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question to Rick.
Yes.
Rick, can you explain a little bit about how the merit board changed over the last couple of years?
Changed as far as?
Makeup.
The makeup of the merit board?
How you make decisions on the board.
Okay, make decisions on the board. Okay, like right now, the way the sheriff's department works, okay, when it comes to disciplinary action, the sheriff can lay someone off without pay for a total of 15 days, but he cannot terminate. he can send them to the merit board for termination, and then we listen to the hearing, and then we make a decision whether to terminate or not. And then some of the other decisions, I mean, we sit down and we write the rules and regulations for the officers, like some of the things that we've done here lately to help retain officers and recruit officers is like we come up with the pay matrix to make the sheriff's department pretty much bring them up to scale as far as getting paid like people like Fishers and Carmel, because we had a hard time recruiting before because our pay scale was not up to Fishers and Carmel. People could go to Indy and get a higher paying job at Fishers and Carmel. So, we come up with the pay matrix to do that. We expanded it out to you no longer have to live in Bartholomew County. You can live into an adjacent county that touches Bartholomew County. You can be an officer in another city. And when you come to Columbus to be an officer, we will accept, your credentials without you having to go through the police academy and so on. So the decisions as a board, we sit down, we make decisions. The sheriff has nothing to do with the decisions that we make as far as the rules and regulations and so on.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Thank you.
Now we want to move on to Olisa, who was formerly the president of the local chapter of the NAACP. And in that role, you have a lot of contact with the community and you get to see a lot of what's going on. So we'd like to hear your perspective about some of the things you see us doing well, needing to improve, and a plan to improve. So Olisa?
So some of the things, I always like to start off with the positive things. I think that we have so many negative things going on right now that we need to hear positive things. I think that the things that are positive in Columbus is actually the people of Columbus. Most of the people in Columbus want to do better and they want to be better. I mean, if you are paying attention, like I saw on Facebook where Beth Stroh, she owns the bookstore Viewpoint. She's having a hard time keeping books on the shelf that speak to people recognizing what white privilege is and stuff like that. So people really do want to do better. And I think that is the biggest thing that we can look to in Columbus. And I think that it's not only the citizens of Columbus, it's the leadership of Columbus. Because when I talk to Mary Verdon, or when I talk to Jim Linnep or Ida, like everybody is really receptive to whatever idea I have. And typically, like when I read to them, I'm like, hey, I got an idea. And they're super excited about it. And they're willing to work with me to develop the idea. Because I think that they also they can see the potential of Columbus, that they want to, they want us to be the beacon on the hill too, because we have that potential to be it's funny because we have the potential to show people what to do in crisis situations with, and we're the hometown of Mike Pence, right? So we have that potential. So I think that's exciting, I think, for everybody across the board, regardless of your race or creed. I think the reason that we have noticed an uptick in racial incidents or things like that is because more people have become, on the opposite side of that, more people have become emboldened to say whatever to whomever they think they want to say it to. But we, whomever they're saying it to is not, they're standing up for themselves more now than I think they have. We're probably getting back to the point where, because I know when I was younger, we stood up for ourselves, but not as much as maybe like back in my parents' age. I don't know how to say that delicately, but I think that the generation before us, they were pretty vocal in what they were going to take and what they were not going to take. But
Right.
We have become complacent in, we don't. Some of us, our generation, stopped recognizing that racism even existed, because we have become complacent. We, like Ms. Roxanne said, we have good jobs. We can pretty much go where we want to go in Columbus. I mean, so those types of things have made us, my generation, pretty complacent, because, why would we? Because we're going to school, we're doing those things. So I think that is one of the things that could be better, is that we have to be more focused and more conscious in regards to our history, right? Because Columbus has a rich history.
Right.
Indiana has a rich history, good, bad, or ugly. It's still our history. And I think that we, sorry, I keep looking up and I apologize. I'm just thinking, I think that they balance each other out. So as long as we keep doing the work to fight the racism, to educate people, because I believe all people are good at heart, and we just they're just not educated, perhaps, right? So that's our job, is to educate the people so that they can be better, so that we can be a beacon on the hill.
Good, thank you. And I will mention at this point that you do have to stand up for yourself. What we used back in our day won't work today, will it, Roxanne or Rick?
But I think it does. I think that the protests, I think we model our protests after what happened before, right? Because if you, but the only thing now that I see different from the 60s and the 70s is that the protests are just not people of color. It's the broad range. Like when you look at the protests that are in Portland, those protests are predominantly Caucasian people. They're not people of color. So when you look across the country, and I think that's where we are. And especially here in Columbus, I think that we're so forward moving. The people that have moved here or are from here want to do better, to be better. And I think they're willing to do the work, which is exciting.
And the key point is standing up for yourself, because Roxanne and my sister were the ones who opened up the prom in Columbus, Indiana, back in
my claim to fame.
60s. So that was not an easy thing to do, but they insisted. And as a result, it benefited not just African Americans, but it benefited all students at that point in time. So we have to get into the habit of doing it ourselves. We have to go and turn in those complaints if we feel that we've been mistreated, so that people can review those things. And there's data.
I agree. And I have always said that, so you can't complain about the process if you're not using the process.
Yes.
So if the process is you file a complaint and you turn it into whomever you turn it into, there are several options for you to turn it in. And if it doesn't go the way you think it should go, then you need to use your voice and you need to voice your complaint. But I think the problem with that, with us, is that, or this community perhaps, is that we don't use the process. We like to complain about the process, but we haven't used it. So so therein lies the problem. Like, you have to use the process so you can understand what it is first. And secondly, if it's working or if it's not working.
Right.
Sure.
And one of the best pieces of advice my father gave me, which helped make me successful, was he would say, there's 3 sides to every story. Your side, the other person's side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. So that it's important that all angles get investigated. Jerome, I want to get to you and your exciting new role on the city council, and to hear your view as a younger person.
So yeah, thanks for pointing out that I'm the younger person again. I don't think I've done that enough. But yeah, so as far as being a young Black male, first off, being a young Black male in society currently is a scary feeling. And that's just based off of whether it's what you see on the media or just daily life experiences. So I feel like as a young Black person, especially on city council, I feel like a lot of eyes are on me, but I'm okay with that. That's not something that bothers me. But as far as talking to pertaining to Black males, I feel there's a couple things I wanted to jot down to make sure I got across. Is encouraging Black males to step outside of the box. I feel a lot of Black males, we kind of sit inside this bubble, and we are afraid to do things that somebody may look at us differently. A lot of my friends, when I told them I was running for city council, they ragged on me. They told me, "Oh man, you this, you that," but it can't deter you off your path. I feel like a lot of us look at, and when I say us, a lot of young Black males will look at society and we'll look at where are the other Black males successful at. We look at rappers, we look at athletes. That's what we kind of attach ourselves to, and that's what we choose to go after. But we have to look at the reality of a situation where it's not likely that you're going to be a famous athlete or a famous rapper or a famous actor. So find your niche, find your purpose, and go after it. One thing that I know I want to touch on was, I think it was a saying called, "I am my brother's keeper." There are a lot of successful Black men in Columbus. I feel like as a successful Black man, I'm not putting myself in that category yet. But for those who are in that category, I feel like it's our responsibility to reach down and pick up and reach down and grab that young Black man, find the young Black men in the community that may be struggling, that may be lost. I feel like it's our job, and a lot of mainly the older generation, to reach up or to reach down and pull us up. I feel like that's very important. I also want us to make sure that we understand how perception is everything. So how you carry yourself, how you talk, how you walk, it's very important. I often get made fun of based off the way I dress. I've never been a guy who sags my clothes. I don't wear Jordans. I don't fit the mold that most young Black males in my generation kind of sit in. But that's okay for me because that's how I carry myself. But also at a younger age, I was taught that how people's first instinct of you, their view of you, that really matters. So I feel like that's very important. I think somebody touched on it earlier when they were talking about the system. As far as a young Black male or Black males in general, I feel like it's very important for us to stay out of the system. The system is not here for us to succeed. The system was made for you to fail. It's a trap. I've felt that way. I'm not a supporter of the judicial system. I don't like it. That's just my personal opinion, because it was never made for us to succeed. So we should do our best to make sure that we never put ourselves in that position. And last thing I want to say is vote. I think it is extremely important for every young Black male, if you are not registered to vote, I think it's very important for you to vote. I think it's very important for you to know that your voice matters. You need to be heard. You are a Black male. You are a Black king. You need to understand that. Walk with your head up. I see a lot of Black guys around town walk with their head down. Walk with your head up. Be proud about who you are. And that's kind of my take on, being a young Black male, also being a young Black male in city council.
You're muted.
Brenda.
You're muted.
Thank you. Stephanie, are there any questions from the Facebook page? Okay. Well, within the group, do you have questions for one another?
Yeah, I do have a question for Jerone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Jerome, you touched on something when you said, be proud of being Black. And, and that was one of the things I still remember doing the taffy pull with Mrs. Roberts in the basement at Second Baptist. Mm-hmm. And having African dance and all of those activities that made me kind of identify with being Black. And one of the things that I noticed, and again, I returned 6 years ago, and then I've been with the school system for a year. So one of the things I've noticed in talking with students, they're even very young students from middle to high school, with Black students, there's this feeling of, I want to be anything but Black. And that seems to, and then with our biracial children, it's like some of the ones that I've spoken with have said, well, I don't get bullied as long as they know I'm not Black. I just wanted to kind of get, because you're one of the younger ones, get some impact and, you know, some input from you on how did that happen? Because when I grew up here, it was okay to be Black and proud of being Black. And I come back and the kids want to be everything but Black. What has happened?
I'm not sure if you guys can see me or not. I don't know if my camera's messing up, but I feel like that's a weird, kind of not really a weird situation, but it's a weird topic because I was always proud to be Black when I was brought up. That's how I was happy. I didn't care if I was the only Black kid in class, but I was proud of who I am. When I got to college, I was told I wasn't Black because I didn't fit the mold. I wasn't that guy. I talk different. I pronounce my words, whatever, whatever jargon, that just wasn't who I was. But as far as the kids now, I don't know if it's a fear, because I deal with it with some of the kids that I deal with in track or I see around, if it's a fear or if it's a lack of knowledge. I feel like they're not taught their history in order to appreciate who they are. When I can be at track practice and I ask one of my athletes, hey, do you know who Emmett Till is? He looks at me like, never heard the name and never heard the name. It's just certain things in history that aren't taught to our students, and especially our young Black men, to where they're not proud of who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they came from. All they see is on media, I'm looked at in this light. So if I act this way, then people may not like me. That's just my take on it. I agree with that, but that's kind of my view of how they perceive that.
It's when I hear this from maybe fifth and sixth grade boys, that are biracial in general. I don't have any problems, or my friend has a problem because everybody knows he's Black. Those are kind of some disturbing trends. And I just wanted to get some input on what maybe perhaps we can do, and maybe the rest of the panel can give us insight on what we can do to help establish more self-esteem in our children who cannot hide under a light colored hue.
Yeah, I also feel like it's important for, you said it, you touched on it earlier, of how it would have been for you to go through school and not see somebody, as far as not just another student, but another teacher or faculty that looks like you. They're going around day in and day out, they see nobody that looks like them. That's got to be tough. That's got to be tough for fifth and sixth graders, especially if you're biracial. Unless you have a strong, depending on if your father is Black or white, if you have a strong Black father in your life that's instilling in you those principles, giving you that confidence, you may not know, you may be lost, but I feel like where it says, I am my brother's keeper, that's where the community comes in to grab these young fifth and sixth grade Black boys to start being mentors, being those people that can grab them like, hey man, be happy who you are. And if you don't know who you are, take the time to explain to them who they really are. Because I feel like that could be a kind of a disconnect right there, because they don't know who they are.
Okay, good discussion. Other questions, comments?
I have some questions.
Okay.
And you can cut me off because this might be okay. So I have a couple of questions. I guess my first question is for Mr. Rick, when it comes to policing and things like that. You mentioned that there's an issue with recruiting and then retaining Black police officers and sheriffs where we are. I think, and you can give me your input, I think that a lot of people in the Black community do not know what good policing is. So that profession is looked down on because they don't know what does it look like to be a good policeman and do your job well. And I think that people only have the perception of policing as what's shown in the media, but policing is a whole spectrum of what they do for the community, how they interact with the community. So I think that that may be an issue when it comes to recruiting people to come here besides the salary, is that people, I think society in general just do not know what is good policing, and that the truth is it's actually an honorable job, which we haven't seen put forth when it comes to the police brutality that we're seeing in the nation. I want to just get your perspective on how you feel about that.
That's very true. As far as the salary, like I'm going to start with the sheriff's department. I mean, right now we are on par with some of the like richer communities in the state, like say, for instance, Carmel and Fishers, Indiana. But, you know, like this last go around, we had a hiring process about 5 weeks ago, and we had like 100 applicants. And out of those 100 applicants, we had one African-American woman. And she made it all the way to the merit board interview, but at the last minute, she dropped out, you know, like 15 minutes before her interview with us. And as far as, you know, like recruiting, you nailed it, you know, like perception, you know, like a lot of people, they see what's going on television and they don't want to be part of it, you know, like it scares them. One of the questions we ask, you know, the people that we interview, what scares you? And then a lot of them say being misperceived about, you know, like doing my job, you know, like I said, will that stop you from doing your job? No, it's just like people may take it the wrong way. Everybody in the world's got a camera now. And like, that just scares me. And like, but you know, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the right thing. And it, you know, it's going to stop me from doing my job. So, you know, like people are getting by the perception because like a lot of them know what a good police officer is because it's not stopping them from applying. Like I said, we had 100 applicants our last hiring process, which is very good. I mean, for, you know, given today's climate, as far as what people think of the police officers, we still have people wanting to be police officers, but we're just not bringing the minorities in that we want to bring in.
Okay. Hattie, I have a question for you. Are voting rights and unequal sentencing issues in Bartholomew County?
That's a good question. I don't know enough about those things. I think we can see the national trends that both of those things are an issue everywhere, especially the unequal sentencing. And I've seen it myself in the courtroom that so much is left up to judicial discretion. That when, you know, a judge has a range of sentencing to offer or a range of decisions to make about any particular issue, a lot is left up to them. And because of the nature of living in a white supremacist society of the United States, it's natural that those things are going to be administered unequally. And so I can only imagine that it's an issue here in Columbus as well as in the larger world. And that perhaps, I mean, in my opinion, decreasing prosecution of all cases and trying to think of other options besides placing people in prison and jail would be a better option. But in the meantime, also making sure that things like that are left up to larger systems like the law, rather than leaving it up to an individual judge who might have had a crabby morning or a bad interaction with somebody the day before that would influence his or her decision in that moment. As far as the voting, and I'm not sure about that, and maybe Jerone knows more since he's been such a big part of our voting system recently. But I know that myself and some other young people, and I'm sure all of our other candidates are working on this as well, about making sure with our big election coming up in November that we're trying to get everybody registered to vote and make sure we can get people to the polls, whether that's renting out a van and making sure people who lack transportation have that option to get to the polls, or making sure people are educated on the ways that they can do early voting and absentee voting.
Okay, thank you. Jerome or Olisa, do you have anything to add about that?
I think that now more than ever, people are recognizing that, especially in Columbus, that voting is probably important. And it used to be where you would hear people say, my vote doesn't count. But we have proof, like in Jerome, that definitely you can win by one vote. So everybody's vote counts. So I think that that's the message that we have to keep spinning and saying, and that every vote counts, because I think that's how people get disenfranchised with the system, is that they hear all this rhetoric about the Electoral College, and they're like, well, what does it matter if I vote? Well, it does matter, especially, and I think that that's part of the problem too, is that people just vote for the presidential elections. Well, and we forget that the down ballots affect you probably more
Right.
than the presidential election. So, and I think that all stems from not lack of education about what the process is. It all goes back to processes. Like you have to recognize those. And so did you not learn it in high school? Like what didn't you, why weren't you involved? You know, so for me, I was involved when I was younger because my aunt said you are going to do these things. And they were heavily involved in the NAACP. They were, you know, so I think that's part of the problem. And I'll even own up to some of that, because when my son doesn't want to do something, it's sometimes easier just to go do it by myself, right? Whereas when I was younger, if there was an NAACP meeting or if there was a program, I wasn't asked if I wanted to be a part of that. I was just put in it. And well, I mean, I'm trying to manage that piece of it, because I want to just be like, okay, you're going to do this, but then are you going to do it well? So I think for me, I've been thinking about the question that Kimberly asked. I'm sorry to waffle back and forth, but I think for me, the community was way more active when I was younger. We went to trips to see HBCUs. I mean, the church was more active. Black youth were together in church. So that's where they connected. Even if they went to different schools, they were connected in the church. I don't know that that's happening anymore. So I think that there are certain things that were happening probably 30 years ago that aren't, well, probably longer than 30 years ago, but that aren't happening now. Like the church isn't as strong as it used to be. And I think that those are the things that affect our youth today, is they don't have the connections with each other, so that they can feel some type of community and be proud of who they are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Brenda?
Yes.
One last thing I would like to add about the voting issue is that it's important that people vote, but it's also important that people be able to vote. And the
Right.
voter suppression issue in this country is something that we need to address. And we're fortunate enough here in Bartholomew County that I voted by mail this year. I've voted by early voting. You know, it's been a 5-minute process to vote in this county. But if you go a little farther north to Indianapolis, it's not as easy for people to vote.
Right.
And I personally haven't fact checked this yet, but maybe Jerome or Olisa may know. But I was told that there's like 25 voting locations in Marion County. And if you move up north to Hamilton County, which is Carmel and the area up there, there's over 100 voting locations up there. So, and then you're also talking about, you know, our current leader talking about suppressing mail-in voting. So these are things that we need to be mindful of as citizens, that we need to make sure that we're electing officials who think this is important and are interested not only in people voting, but being able to vote and be able to vote
Yes.
easily. And, you know, I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for pointing that out, Tom, because it should be the will of the people, not few. And if you're afraid to allow everyone to vote, that's a problem. So if you're that good, you shouldn't have to worry about it.
I would like to say one other thing about voting. Let's also understand that in the state of Indiana, if you do not have the proper an ID, not necessarily a driver's license, but an ID, and people who are struggling to pay their utility bill or to put food on the table, spending $15 or $20 for that ID and all the things, the documents that you must gather to get those is extremely hard. And I don't know where to send anyone to get $15 to get their ID. So if you don't have that ID, you don't vote.
So is that something that the NAACP could head up and get done in terms of collecting money and being a resource for people to be able to have the proper ID?
And documents, how to get the proper documents.
Olisa?
I think the bigger thing that I've noticed when talking to people about that, especially the elderly people, is that the documents aren't there to get the ID. And I think that I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think that we need to get people to the poll by any means necessary. So that means if we need to load people up in our car and make several trips, if we need to get church buses and do caravans, that's what we need to do. We are in a state right now where we can't afford not to have everybody vote. Everybody. Right. So I'll ask that question as a matter of fact. I know that I'm planning to do some things as the candidate to try to get people to make it easier to give them more access points to even register to vote. And then I think that's the first step for me is to try to get people registered to make sure that they are registered.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment as well on voting. You can't see me, okay. Jerome. But we were talking, I think earlier, somebody mentioned as far as the lack of participation from a lot of, whether it be African-American males or just the African-American population in general. I feel like that goes back to, and I always harp on education when it comes to educating us of our past. I feel like we aren't as educated in why it's so important for us to vote and what we did to give us that right to vote. So I feel like if that is taught in class at an early age and that's constantly instilled in youth, then it's kind of second nature. They now look at it as, instead of just, I don't want to vote, they look at it as a privilege. Like, my ancestors died just to give me this right to vote. Because I was part of that population. I'll be very blunt, very honest. Before I was elected, before I ran for city council, I never paid attention to voting. I never thought it was important. I thought my vote didn't matter. So I just kind of went along with the process. But through running for city council and finding out what city government does and how important it is to vote in your local elections, I now see the importance. But without that education, you know, and it happened for me really quick. But without that education, I would never realize that it's very important and what my people really did for me to have that right. So I feel like that's a key that we're missing, that would actually put a lot more Black people in those booths. And it's an easy process. Like Mom Tom said, it doesn't take you long, whether you vote through mail, whether you go early voting. There are opportunities to go, and it's 5 minutes. Literally, you can get out your car, walk in and back in your car in 5 minutes. But also to touch on his point about the voting booths in Marion County, not only are there limited voting areas, but this past primary, they shut down several voting booths, voting polls, and made it very, very hard. I think one of the high schools was open and the line was wrapped up in the entire parking lot. By doing that, I mean, you're asking people to stand in line for 2 hours to vote. You're going to deter a lot of people from voting. So that is a big issue in that area.
Well, history is important. And I think teaching people how folks were beat on and in jail and everything else was a way of helping that to happen. Now we're coming towards the end of our time. And Paulette, do you have any final words you would like to say before I wrap it up?
I would just like to share that there are some wonderful books out there for us to read as individuals, and the community should be able to read them also. And I'm sure that you can order them through Viewpoint, or of course get them online. The book called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent. It's about an exploration of race and the hierarchy in the United States. And then there's another book called The Warmth of Other Suns. And this is about Black migration from the South into the North in the early 20th century. And the third book is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And that is an essential read on racism. Okay. And I'll sit with you in just a minute, the poem, Why the Cage.
Okay. Well, let me wrap things up. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for your thoughtful comments. I enjoyed meeting those that I haven't met before. And I look forward to working with you on addressing some of these issues. I think one of the key things that I hope someone in this community will take on will be addressing systemic racism. We can continue to do all of the one-off things, but there's a real need to look at how our systems have perpetuated racism in this community and to address those things. So I'm going to look forward to that announcement that will come out, that someone is going to look at that. And it needs to be a cross-section of all voices with strong leadership. Because if I look back, and there is value in looking at history and things that we've learned, change is possible if we focus on strong leadership that's across the board. And that means that this is not just a Black issue, it's a white issue as well. And that's what helped us back in the 70s, the early 70s. It was people joining forces, and it looks like, and it's been confirmed within this group, that exists, that there are people out there wanting to help, and we just need to figure out how we organize them to do that. The other thing I would say, building off of Paulette's comments, is that change begins with the person. You have to, as our former president said, you have to be the change that you want to see. So we can't sit back and just wait on other people to do it. We have to step out and do it within whatever our realm is. That means doing things such as taking advantage of books. There's also books available in the Bartholomew County Library that cover all different topics. It means being honest with ourselves about prejudices that we have. And I'm not speaking to a particular group, that's all of us. That we have to honestly look at ourselves and say, where are we and what prejudices do we have that gets in the way of our dealing with other people? We have to have an unwillingness to accept the status quo. I know it's hard. I know there's a sacrifice. I have a great, great, great uncle who worked during the abolitionist movement, who actually lost his life in the pursuit of equal rights for all people, particularly for African Americans. We don't have to go that far, but there are repercussions. Back in the day, in the 70s, I remember Roxanne telling me about how her father ended up being bothered very forcefully by the KKK. He went in and started a dialogue with those people, and they were able to at least create some understanding. So we have to quit getting on sides and start to figure out, how do we come together, listen to one another, and look at a path through that is good for all parties involved? We have to have young people be involved. And Jerome and Olisa, we picked on you because we're just so delighted that you have stepped up. And Kimberly, you're younger than we are, so you're but we're delighted that people have stepped up and taken an interest in their community. And we're delighted to have new people coming into this community who are willing to step up and work on this and to get involved and not stay in their little places, but to get people to know them and to help them in those kinds of things. It's so important because now is the time. That's why we are having this program, because with what's going on in our country, we've never had a better opportunity to make change.
Correct.
People are ready from all races, and we need to move forward and push this ball up the hill. And I believe we can do it. That's why I don't get, I see the future as being bright. because there are people willing to get out there and work and to sacrifice to make these things happen. And I know there's people out in the community that do that too. I would ask local organizations in Columbus, whenever you do an event or something, you should make sure that it includes mention of the contributions of African Americans in this community. It should not just be because, I guess, given my diversity days, everything I look at through the lens of inclusion. And if I come up and I see something, even like photos, I look at the board of directors, all of those things tell me where you are. And it's important that your boards be diversified and that you take the step of training your people in whatever issues that are out there. There may be a need in this community for conflict resolution, because sometimes it sounds like we keep going around and around in terms of certain issues. So we need to look at how can we start talking more effectively with one another to work on solutions. So I feel that this is an outstanding time. I thank the library for initiating this conversation with us and wanting to have it. And we need more of that within this community. People coming out saying, hey, I want to learn more about that. And I want to have dialogues and I want to get involved and do something, because this is my community and I'm going to make it a better community for all. So with that, I thank the listeners who have stayed with us, and we're signing off because it's 8 o'clock. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to start the poem, just like we said we would, and I'm going to read to you why the cage bird sings.
Okay.
A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The cage bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a cage bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The cage bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. I want you to take that poem and make sure that you understand that there are two birds there, one about opposing experiences and one who is able to roam freely. And we need to understand that we all want to be able to be free in all ways of society. I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Mary for contacting me to along with Brenda to pull this together, and especially each one of our panelists. You made this program a success. I want to thank Rick, Hattie, Tom, Roxanne, Kimberly, Miss Rachel, Jerome, and Olisa. You did an excellent job, and thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for pulling it together.